Good evening. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Sunday, Yom Rishon. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house? Melissa in Great Neck, Bella in Florida, Bill in Mid-Missouri, Paula. Listening with interest. I love it. Shandora in the Bronx. Sharon in New Jersey. Paul says, miss the singing sound. I try to only inflict my singing on everybody on Saturday nights as we come out of Shabbos. David on the Jersey Shore. Lynn in North Texas. Marjorie in Georgia. Michelle in Southwest Washington. Welcome, everybody. Our daf today, excuse me, is page 59 here in Tractate Gittin, the 19th volume of the Talmud. We're working our way through chapter 5. Today, finally finishing our discussion of Mishnah number 6. And we'll cover Mishnah number 7, and Mishnah number 8 will open as well. As is so often the case, as we get later in the chapter, the Mishnahs start to come a little bit quicker. So Mishnah number 6 was this idea that for the betterment of the world, and we've been on an extended digression away from the laws of divorce, which is what the tractate is generally about, but based on the subject that the sages enacted certain rabbinic decrees for the betterment of the world. Among them were decrees dealing with property transfers during and in the wake of the terrible war with Rome that resulted in the destruction of Jerusalem and the Second Temple, but also made it difficult to understand, whether certain property transfers were authentic or not. Had people given up their property under duress? What was to become of that property when peace was restored? So we've been discussing that Mishnah number 6. We got into the story of that war itself, but we're past that now. And we pick it up a few paragraphs into page 59a. Just yesterday, we had at the end of last night's class, we had started to discuss how in a certain court, meaning in Rebbi's court, right, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, who supervised the compiling of the Mishnah. And he himself, Rebbi, the reason that Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi is called Rebbi, right, when it's sort of like the rabbi, when we're talking about there's thousands of rabbis mentioned in the Talmud, but there's one referred to as Rebbi, and that's Yehuda Hanassi. And why was he so great? And we learned at the end of yesterday's class that in his court, they always made the junior members of the Sanhedrin speak first, because if they started from the senior members, that means they would have started with Rebbi. And Rebbi, his views were so respected by all of the other rabbis that after he spoke, nobody would dare to contradict him publicly. So whatever Rebbi said, everybody else would follow in line. And so it was better to hear from the junior members of the Sanhedrin first, so that they could, give their unvarnished opinions, as it were, when they were rendering judgment, and then Rebbi would go last. So, apropos the greatness of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, of Rebbi, Rabbah, the son of Rava, says, and some say that it was Rabbi Hillel, the son of Rabbi Volas, who says, from the days of Moses until the days of Rebbi, we do not find unparalleled greatness in Torah knowledge and unparalleled greatness in secular matters, including wealth and high political office, combined in one place, meaning a single individual. From the days of Moses until Rebbi, we do not find in Jewish history that one person combined both, the outstanding Torah scholarship of the generation, the most outstanding Torah scholar, and the one who was great in both wealth and political authority. From Moses, the next figure who was that prominent and that respected and that august, the next one in history was Rebbi. So we're talking about a period of about 1,200 years. Think about, where was America 1,200 years ago? Nowhere at all. We talk about Jewish history, we often lose track of how long the span is, right? We go back to the Exodus from Egypt, right? The first Seder that we celebrated, that was, I think, well over 3,300 years ago, 3,300 years. There's been so many figures in Jewish history, so many events, so much learning. And in every generation, we have, just untold numbers of scholars adding to this reservoir of knowledge and Torah wisdom for generation after generation for thousands of years. It is truly, it's truly a lot of chutzpah for people to say about such a tradition, what do I need it for? Religion, it's old-fashioned, it's old stuff. What do I need to know from that for? I mean, imagine Torah scholars toiling for generation after generation for over 3,000 years. Yeah, this reservoir of wisdom is vast. But at any rate, from that great stretch of time from Moses until Rebbi, no one combined such prominence in Torah scholarship and secular authority as Rebbi did, right? So this is the statement of Rava. And the Gemara challenges this statement. But was there not such a person? Wasn't there Joshua, right? So Joshua, who took over the leadership of the Jewish people after Moses died. Wasn't there Joshua, who was unparalleled in both domains? And the Gemara answers, during his day, there was Elazar the priest, the high priest, who was Joshua's equal in Torah knowledge. And the Gemara asks, wasn't there Elazar who outlived Joshua? And the Gemara, but was there not such a person? Wasn't there Joshua, who was unparalleled in both domains, right? Joshua knew the most Torah and was the leader of the Jewish people after Moses died. But the Gemara answers this challenge. Well, during the days of Joshua, there was Elazar, who was Joshua's equal in Torah knowledge. So Joshua was not up on the pedestal by himself. The high priest Elazar was his equal in Torah knowledge. And the Gemara asks, well then, what about Elazar? He outlived Joshua, so after Joshua died, it must be that Elazar was the foremost in both Torah and authority over the Jewish people. And the Gemara answers, during his day, Elazar's day, there was Pinchas, who was Elazar's equal in Torah knowledge. And the Gemara objects, well, wasn't there Pinchas who outlived Elazar? Okay, so after Elazar died, Pinchas was the foremost. He was the high priest, and he had absolute authority in religious matters, at least, and he was the utmost Torah authority. And the Gemara objects, no, there were the elders, right? And the elders were equal to Pinchas in Torah knowledge. So the Gemara tries another approach. Wasn't there Saul, who was unparalleled in both domains? That's interesting. We don't usually think of Saul, the first king of Israel, as the absolute authority in his generation, not only as a king, right, the political authority, but also as a Torah scholar and the foremost Torah scholar of his generation. Well, why don't we think of Saul that way? And the answer is pretty obvious, actually. And the Gemara answers, but there was Shmuel, the prophet Samuel, who was Saul's equal in Torah knowledge. And when you read this account in the Bible, and you think, okay, Samuel, the people wanted a king, and so Samuel got the word from God, and they picked this kid Saul, and he was very good looking and tall and distinguished in many ways. But we don't think of him as a Torah scholar on the level of the prophet Samuel. But here the Gemara is telling us that he was. So he was not the foremost scholar, but he was on a level with Samuel, so that's very high. So the Gemara answered, but there was Samuel, and he was Saul's equal in Torah knowledge. So the Gemara asks, okay, didn't Samuel pass away in Saul's lifetime? So after Samuel died, that left Saul the leading figure in both domains. And the Gemara answers, we meant to say that from the days of Moses to the days of Rebbi, there was no other single individual who reigned supreme in Torah and greatness for all the years that he was the leader of the Jewish people. And the Gemara asks, but wasn't there David. Now this is a good answer. King David, who was both the greatest Torah authority and the most powerful temporal authority of his day. And the Gemara answers, yes, David was great, but there was Ira the Yairi. Ira the Yairi, all right? So here in English it's written Ira the Jairite, or the Yairite, right? So there was Ira the Yairite, who was David's equal in Torah knowledge. The Gemara objects, but didn't Ira the Yairite pass away within the lifetime of David? And so after he passed away, David was the foremost Torah authority and secular authority. And so again, the Gemara answers, in order to qualify for this designation, we require that he be the leading figure in both Torah and high office for all the years that he is the leader of the Jewish people. So the Gemara asks, wasn't there Solomon, who was unparalleled in both domains? And the king answers, during his day, there was Shimi ben Gera, who was Solomon's master in Torah knowledge. And the Gemara objects, but didn't Solomon kill him at the beginning of his reign? See 1 Kings chapter 2. And the Gemara answers, we meant to say that from the days of Moses to the days of Rebbi, there was no other single individual who reigned supreme in Torah and greatness, right, and power, authority, all of his years. And the Gemara further objects, but wait a minute, wasn't there Chizkiah, King Chizkiah, who was both the leading Torah scholar of his age and also the king of his people? And the Gemara answers, there was Shebna in that generation who was Chizkiah's equal in Torah knowledge. And the Gemara asks, wasn't he killed in the war against Sennacherib? And the Gemara answers, we meant to say that there was no similar individual who reigned supreme in both Torah and high office all of his years. And the Gemara asks, but wasn't there Ezra, who was the greatest Torah sage of his day and the leader of the Jewish people? And the Gemara answers, there was Nehemiah ben Chakaliah, who was his equal. Now Rav Acha, the son of Rava, says, I also say something similar, that from the days of Rebbi until the days of Rav Ashi, we do not find unparalleled greatness in Torah knowledge and unparalleled greatness in secular matters, including wealth and high political office, combined in one place, i.e. in a single individual. And the Gemara asks, but was there not such a person? But wasn't there Huna bar Nassan, who enjoyed both great Torah scholarship and great wealth, who lived during the time of Rav Ashi? And the Gemara answers, Huna bar Nassan is different, as he himself was subordinate to Rav Ashi, who was his superior in both domains. So, from Moses to Rebbi, no one combined both absolute prominence in Torah and in power over the Jewish people. And then the next one in history after Rebbi was Rav Ashi. Right? And Rav Ashi is one of the redactors of the Gemara. Now, that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 6. Here we go with Mishnah number 7, here in chapter 5. So the following enactments were also made for the betterment of the world. A deaf mute may express his wishes through gestures. That is to say, he can signal that he wishes to buy or sell a certain item, and the purchase or sale is valid. Right? And this is commenting on the fact that under Jewish law, minors, imbeciles, and deaf mutes do not have legal standing to give testimony in court or to enter into certain kinds of financial arrangements. But the law has changed somewhat. It's a very interesting question. In the ancient times, they couldn't be sure what a deaf mute understood or didn't understand. In modern times, we certainly have, wonderful techniques that enable deaf mutes to communicate what they're thinking about very clearly. They didn't have that in ancient times. Is the law different now? That's a question for another day. So here, even in ancient times, they saw that deaf mutes could communicate somewhat, right? And they were given credit for that. So a deaf mute may express his wishes through gestures, to signal that he wants to buy or sell something, and the sale is valid. And similarly, the deaf mute may respond to others through gestures. That is to say, he can signal that he agrees to a transaction initiated by another party, and the transaction is valid. And Ben Betera says signals are not necessary, as even if the deaf mute expresses his wishes to buy or sell through lip movements, or responds to others through lip movements, the transaction is valid. These laws apply to transactions involving movable property as opposed to land. And it was similarly enacted that a purchase made by young children is a valid purchase, and a sale made by them is a valid sale. And these laws apply to transactions involving movable property, in the case of minors also, and not to land. Now the Gemara. Rav Nachman says in clarification of the scope of the dispute between the first Tana and Ben Betera, the dispute is only with regard to the purchase or sale of movable property, but with regard to bills of divorce, all agree, even Ben Betera, that a deaf mute can communicate only through gestures, but not through lip movements. And where did the law end up on this? If a man betrothed a woman when he was a deaf mute so that his betrothal is not valid by Torah law, then just as he can betroth her with gestures, so too he can divorce her with gestures in accordance with Rav Nachman by rabbinic law, right? So deaf mutes can marry by rabbinic law, but not by Torah law. So it's a valid marriage, but as we saw, a deaf mute priest cannot marry a deaf mute woman, or he can, but that marriage doesn't enable her to consume teruma. So we continue. The Gemara asks, it is obvious that this is the case. As didn't we learn in the Mishnah, these laws apply to transactions involving movable property. The Gemara answers, Rav Nachman's statement is necessary, lest you say that the Mishnah means that these laws apply even to transactions involving movable property, and they similarly apply to other matters such as bills of divorce. Therefore, Rav Nachman teaches us that Ben Betera's validation of lip movements applies only to transactions involving movable property, but not to bills of divorce. Now, in the law, it says some write that if he betrothed her with a document that he wrote in his own hand, he can also divorce her in that way. But that's separate than this idea about gestures, whether they are hand gestures or lip gestures, so the deaf mute can communicate. If he had learned to write, already we see that puts him in a different category. Now, there are those who say an alternative version of the previous passage, that Rav Nachman says as follows: just as there is a dispute between the first Tana and Ben Betera with regard to transactions involving movable property, so too there is a dispute with regard to bills of divorce. And the Gemara objects, but didn't we learn in the Mishnah these laws apply to transactions involving movable property, to the exclusion of bills of divorce? And the Gemara answers, say that the Mishnah means as follows: these laws apply even to transactions involving movable property, and similarly they apply to other matters such as bills of divorce, to the exclusion of purchase and sale of land. Now, the Mishnah teaches that a purchase made by young children is a valid purchase, and a sale made by them is a valid sale, and these laws apply to transactions involving movable property. And the Gemara asks, and from what age are children included in this enactment? And Rav Yehuda pointed to Rav Yitzhak, his son, from the age of about 6 or 7. Rav Kahana said from the age of about 7 or 8. And it was taught in a Baraisa from the age of about 9 or 10. So they disagreed on when children had sufficient capacity to understand, what is the law of buying and selling objects. And the Gemara comments, and they do not disagree about the issue itself. Rather, each child is evaluated according to his sharpness. Some children are gifted and understand the nature of business transactions from an earlier age, while others are slower and do not reach the requisite understanding until they are older. And the Gemara asks, what is the reason that the sages instituted this enactment for young children? And Rabbi Abba Bar Yaakov says that Rabbi Yochanan says, in order to provide for the child's livelihood, as there may be times a child will have no other way to support himself but to engage in some type of business. And if his transactions are not valid, he will go hungry. Now, there's a little window into the ancient world. It's hard for us to imagine, and maybe not just the ancient world. Maybe here in America, it's hard for us to imagine that a small child, 6, 7, 8 years old, might somehow be on his own and fending for himself and having to buy and sell and make his way in the world. I mean, it seems unimaginable. But sadly, you go to the third world and you'll find that all the time. And there's not an orphanage or some other institution for every child, and some children are just forced to grow up quickly. And so under this law, such a child, of course he has the right to enter into purchase and sale transactions so that he can live. Now, having cited a tradition reported by Rabbi Abba Bar Yaakov, the Gemara cites another such statement with regard to a different matter. And the verse states, quote, and he said to him who was over the wardrobe, bring forth garments for all the worshipers of the Baal. 2 Kings 10:22. And what is the meaning of the word meltacha, wardrobe? This is how we translated the word in that verse as wardrobe, right? And he said to him who was over the wardrobe, meltacha, bring forth garments for all the worshipers of the Baal. And what is the meaning of this word, meltacha? Rabbi Abba Bar Yaakov says that Rabbi Yochanan says it is something that can be compressed and then stretched, nimlal v'nimtach, back to its former size, i.e. a certain type of garment that can be folded up so that it is very small and afterward unfolded so that it is very large. We've completely left the subject at hand simply because we had a teaching in the name of Rabbi Abba Bar Yaakov, and now we're getting another teaching in his name. Now, when Rabdimi came from the land of Israel to Babylonia, he said that Rabbi Yochanan says a wealthy man named Bonyam ben Nunyam once sent Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rebbi, a gift comprised of the following items: sivni and chums and salsala and malmala, which were all special types of linen. And the Gemara explains what was unique about each of these fabrics. When folded, the sivni and the chums could be compressed to the same size, respectively, of a nut and half a nut. And when the salsal and the malmala were folded, they could be compressed to the size, respectively, of a pistachio nut and half a pistachio nut. And these fabrics were so thin that they could be compressed to a small size, but when they were unfolded, they were large enough to cover Rebbe's body. And the Gemara explains further, what is the meaning of the term malmala? It is something that can be compressed and stretched. I'm thinking about those like space blankets that they often hand out to runners at a marathon. And they're made of like a mylar, just such thin material that you can fold it, to about the size of a business card and about that thick, and it unfolds as like a blanket. But okay, modern plastics, we can understand such a material, but in the ancient world that they had a material that could cover a whole body and be folded up, compressed to the size of a nut, amazing. Now the Gemara returns to examine the matter of the transactions of young children. Get back to the subject. And up to now, how much is their mistake? Meaning, what is the maximum amount that a child can underpay or overcharge without the mistake canceling the sale? And Rabbi Yonah says that Rabbi Zera says up to 1/6 of the article's value, like the mistake of an adult. Did you know that under Jewish law, and we'll see this, we're finishing now, we have this tractate, Gittin, and the next tractate in our journey through Daf Yomi will be Kiddushin. And then we're going to finish a Seder, right? A Seder is an order of tractates, that one called Nashim, which is the family laws. And then the next one is damages, right? So there we start Bava Kama, and we'll get into transactional matters. And then we'll often see this law that if there's a purchase and sale, a buyer and a seller, and they make a mistake, where the buyer ends up paying more than 1/6 above the actual value of the item, then that is cause to void the sale, right? A mistake. Now, if the market will bear it, that's not a mistake. But if they made a mistake about what the item was actually worth, then they can void the sale if that mistake was more than 1/6 of its value. And this law applies to children as well. Abaye raises a dilemma. What is the law with regard to a young child's gift? And Rav Yemar says his gift is not a valid gift. Mar Bar Rav Ashi says his gift is a valid gift. And the sages reversed the attributions of these two statements and sent word of this dispute to Rav Mordechai, leading him to understand. Now, I made a mistake earlier when I said that Rav Ashi was one of the redactors of the Gemara. That's false. It's Rav Asi and Rav Ami. So I'm sorry I misspoke there. Wasn't the incident as follows? When the master, Rav Ashi, was standing with 1 foot on the ground and 1 foot on the step, we said to him, what is the law with regard to a young child's gift? And he said to us, his gift is a valid gift. Whether it is the gift of a person on his deathbed who gives instructions before his death concerning the disposal of his property, or it is the gift of a healthy person, whether it is a large gift or a small gift, in all cases, the gift is a valid gift. It's not quite that simple. I read about this. Where'd it go? Yes, gift is a valid gift. If a minor understands the nature of business transactions, his gift is a valid gift, regardless of whether it is small or large, whether he is well or on his deathbed, in accordance with the opinion of Rav Ashi, as long as he understands what business transactions are. And as we've seen, you'd have to evaluate on a child-by-child basis, do they really understand? Are they old enough to understand? And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 7 here in chapter 5. Mishnah number 8. Having mentioned a series of enactments instituted by the sages for the sake of the betterment of the world, the Gemara continues, these are the matters that the sages instituted on account of the ways of peace. It's a little bit different than the betterment of the world. Now it's for the ways of peace, i.e., to foster peace and prevent strife and controversy. At public readings of the Torah, like when we read the Torah in synagogue, which we do on Mondays and Thursday mornings, which is just a very short reading, and then the full reading of that week's Torah portion we do on Saturday morning in synagogue. So when there's a public reading of the Torah, a priest, a Kohen, always reads first. He's called to the Torah first for the first aliyah, and after him a Levi, a Levite, and after the Levite comes the Israelite. So the sages instituted this order on account of the ways of peace, so that people should not quarrel about who is the most distinguished member of the community. And this is the way it's done. And similarly, the sages enacted that a joining of courtyards is placed in an old house where it had regularly been placed on account of the ways of peace, as will be explained in the Gemara. We learned this back in Tractate Eruvin, so that people can join courtyards and carry food, between courtyards when they don't have an Eruv around the whole city. So there's the joining of just courtyards, and the way they do that, joining these courtyards, is they deposit, 1 meal's worth of food in one of the houses, and it's understood to join these courtyards into sort of one master residence that people can carry stuff around on Shabbos between the courtyards. Okay, well, where are you going to put that meal? Who's going to have the honor of having that food set aside as a meal for the joining of courtyards? Okay, so you put it in a house where it was always done. You don't move it to a new house so that people don't argue about who is the most respected member of that community. And the sages enacted that the pit that is nearest to the irrigation channel that supplies water to several pits or field is filled first on account of the ways of peace. They established a fixed order for the irrigation of fields so that people would not quarrel over who is given precedence. Animals, birds, or fish that were caught in traps are not acquired by the one who set the traps until he actually takes possession of them. Nevertheless, if another person comes and takes the animals out of the traps that someone else set, it is considered robbery on account of the ways of peace. Rabbi Yosei says, this is not by rabbinic enactment, this is full-fledged robbery. Similarly, a lost item found by a deaf-mute or an imbecile or a minor is not acquired by him since he lacks the legal competence to effect acquisition. Nevertheless, taking such an item from a deaf-mute or an imbecile or a minor is considered robbery on account of the ways of peace. And Rabbi Yosei says it's not by rabbinic enactment. This is full-fledged robbery. If a poor, and the Mishnah continues, if a poor person gleans olives at the top of an olive tree and olives fall to the ground under the tree, then taking those olives away from that person is considered robbery on account of the ways of peace. And Rabbi Yosei says this is full-fledged robbery. And one does not protest against poor Gentiles who come to take gleanings or forgotten sheaves or the produce in the corner of the field, which is given to the poor, even though these leavings are meant exclusively for the Jewish poor. But we don't complain if a non-Jewish poor person comes and takes these charitable leavings. Why don't we complain? On account of the ways of peace. That is Mishnah number 8. Here comes the Gemara. And the Mishnah teaches that at public readings of the Torah, a priest reads first, and after him a Levite. And Gemara asks, from where are these matters derived? What is the source of this law in the Torah? Right, so I often serve as the gabbai in our shul, in our synagogue. And so what the gabbai has to do is that we come in the morning service on Saturday. First, we read a bunch of prayers. The prayer leader leads us all in prayers, and then we reach the Torah service. And so the gabbai selects a person, a member of the congregation, to have pesicha. He opens the doors of the Aron Kodesh, the ark where the Torah scrolls are stored. And then he takes out the Torah, hands it to the prayer leader, who recites some words, and we sing some prayers with him. And then the Torah is placed on the table for the Torah reading. And then the gabbai has selected people who are going, or selects people to come up for the honor of saying a blessing before the Torah reader reads that section of the Torah, let's say 1/7 of that day's Torah portion, that week's Torah portion. And then he says the blessing afterward, and then we call the next person. And 7 people are called for the 7 aliyahs, and then we also add a maftir, a kind of extra aliyah at the end. And then the person with the maftir also says the blessings over the haftorah, a portion from the prophets and writings that is read after the Torah reading. So on a normal Saturday, 7 people are called. And what they're talking about here is that we have a tradition that as the gabbai, that the gabbai has to select first a Kohen for the first aliyah and then a Levite for the second aliyah. Now, of course, it can happen, as the Gemara will discuss, that there is no Kohen present in the synagogue or there is no Levite present in the synagogue. And then what does the gabbai do? But normally the first aliyah goes to a Kohen, the second aliyah goes to a Levite, and then the next 5 go to Israelites, right? Regular Jews who are neither Kohen nor Levite. Okay, so the fact that we give the first 2 aliyahs to a Kohen and then to a Levite, from where are these matters derived? What is the source for this law in the Torah? And Rav Matana said, as the verse states, and quote, and Moses wrote this Torah and delivered it to the priests, the sons of Levi, Deuteronomy 31:9. And the Gemara explains the inference. Is that to say, I do not know that the priests are the sons of Levi? Why, right? So the Kohanim, the priests, are the descendants of Aaron, but Aaron, Moses' brother, Aaron and Moses were both descendants of Levi, right? Levi, of the tribe of Levi. So the Gemara is rhetorically asking, is that to say I do not know that the priests are all sons of Levi? Why is it necessary for the verse to say this? Rather, the Torah was first delivered to the priests and afterward to the other Levites, and this serves as the source for the enactment that first a priest reads from the Torah and after him a Levite. And Rabbi Yitzchak Napacha said that this halacha, this law, is derived from here, as it is written in Deuteronomy 21:5, and the priests, the sons of Levi, shall come near. And the Gemara again asks, is that to say I don't know that the priests are the sons of Levi? Rather, the Torah was first given to the priests and afterwards to the other Levites. And from this we learn that first a priest reads from the Torah and after him a Levite. Rav Ashi derives it from a different verse, not in the Torah, but in the Tanakh, book of Chronicles, 1 Chronicles 23:13, quote, the sons of Amram, Aaron and Moses, the sons of Amram, that was the father of Moses and Aaron, right? So the sons of Amram, Aaron and Moses, and Aaron was separated that he should be sanctified as most holy. And this indicates that Aaron and his descendants, the priests, are considered to be holier than the rest of the tribe of Levi. Consequently, they are given precedence in public Torah readings. Rabbi Chia bar Abba said that this law is derived from a different source, and he points to Leviticus 21:8. And you shall sanctify him, giving a priest priority for every matter of sanctity. And with regard to this verse, a sage from the school of Rabbi Yishmael taught, and you shall sanctify him, giving a priest priority for every matter of sanctity. To open the discussion in the study hall first, to recite the blessing of the grace after meals first. Whoa. Sorry. I tapped my little controller. Wait a minute. Sorry. Okay. Let me back that up a little. Okay, where was I? So the school of Rabbi Yishmael taught that we give priority to the Kohanim, to the priests, in everything, right? To open the discussion first. In the study hall, we let the Kohanim speak first. To recite the blessing of the grace after meals, we let a Kohen lead it. And to take a fine portion at a meal first, meaning that he can choose any portion at a meal for himself. Now, we have these traditions. Now, what's interesting about this is that a Kohen, what did he do to deserve this honor? He was just born that his father was a Kohen. And it might well be that in a room, let's say at a meal, you have a Torah scholar, perhaps the most prominent Torah scholar of the generation. Or in synagogue on a Saturday morning, you have a wonderful, august Torah scholar present. But he's a Yisrael, he's a regular Jew. He's revered by the generation in terms of his Torah learning, but he's not the son of a priest. And the Kohen, who is the son of a priest, might not be learned at all. In fact, he might be somebody who, stopped going to synagogue years ago and has just come back for a visit. He's returned to synagogue after an absence of many years. Who gets called to the Torah first? The Kohen, right? We have this tradition, and we give honor to the Kohanim because God sanctified them. And that is what we do. Abaye said to Rav Yosef, according to this, why does the Mishnah teach that the priest reads from the Torah on account of the ways of peace, indicating that this is a rabbinic enactment? Is it not by Torah law that he reads first? You've given me all these sources. It should be by Torah law that the priest reads first. And Rav Yosef said to Abaye, indeed, it is by Torah law. But the reason that the priest reads first is on account of the ways of peace. Abaye objected, aren't the laws of the entire Torah also in other words, they're saying it is by Torah law, but why did the Torah make this law? It is on account of the ways of peace, so that the people shouldn't be arguing with each other who's most prominent. Since the Kohanim are sanctified, we don't have to argue who's the biggest Torah scholar in the room. It's going to be a priest who goes first no matter what. So Abaye objected, aren't the laws of the entire Torah also given on account of the ways of peace? How do we know that? Proverbs 3:17, quote, her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. Who is she? The Torah. Consequently, this law is no different from the other laws in the Torah, all of which were given to increase pleasantness and tranquility in the world. So rather, Abaye said, the Mishnah's statement that a priest reads first from the Torah on account of the ways of peace is in accordance with what was said by my master, Rabbah, as it is taught in a Baraisa, Tosefta Brachos 5:3, when two people are eating together from a single dish, they must wait for each other. But if there are three, each of them eats when he wishes, and they do not need to wait for each other. And generally, the one who breaks bread extends his hand to take the food first. But if he wishes to show respect to his teacher or to one who is greater than he, and allow him to take first, he has permission to do so. And the master, Rabbah, said with regard to this Baraisa, they taught this with regard to a meal, that one may show honor to a person of greater stature and allow him to take food first. But in the synagogue, one may not show another honor, because the congregants are liable to come to quarrel about who is the most distinguished among them. Accordingly, the ruling of the Mishnah is that to prevent strife and controversy, it is not permitted for a priest to honor an Israelite and allow him to read first from the Torah in his place. Even if the priest wanted to step aside and let the prominent Torah scholar come to the Torah first, he's not permitted to do so, and that is the law. If there's a priest in the congregation, he comes up first, then the Levite, and then the Yisrael. Rav Matana said, with regard to this matter that you stated, that in the synagogue, a priest is not permitted to honor an Israelite and allow him to read first. We said this only concerning Shabbos and festivals, when many people are present for the services, but not on Mondays and Thursdays, when only a small number of people are there. On those days, it is permitted for one to honor his superior, and there's no concern that this will lead to a quarrel. And the Gemara asks, is that so? Is it actually prohibited for a priest to honor his teacher and allow him to read first in his place? But didn't Rav Huna, who was not a priest, read the Torah section ordinarily reserved for priests, even on Shabbos and festivals? And the Gemara answers, Rav Huna is different, as even Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi, the most important priests in the land of Israel, were subject to his jurisdiction. Therefore, there was no concern about a quarrel, because everyone agreed that he was the leading authority of the generation. It was fitting that he should read from the Torah first. And Abaye said, we have a tradition. So they made that point in the conversation, but that's not where the law ended up. We always let a Kohen read first and then a Levite, right? Now, Abaye said that we have a tradition that if there is no priest in the synagogue at the time of the Torah reading, then the bundle is separated, meaning a Levite is not shown precedence over Israelites. Now, this is also true. If there's no Kohen present, you're permitted to call up a Levite first for the Kohen Aliyah, and then after that, a Yisrael can go, and it's only Yisrael's after that. But you don't have to call up a Levite. So if you have Levites in the congregation, but there's no Kohen in the building, then you don't have to call up a Levite first. You can just skip the Levites and go right to the Yisraels. Right, so Abaye said, if there's no priest in the room, the bundle has been separated, and we don't have to call up a Levite first. And Abaye said that we have a tradition that if there's no Levite in the synagogue, a priest can read in his place. So let's say we have priests, but no Levites. So then what do we do? Do we go Kohen and then Yisrael? But remember that Kohanim are actually Levites also, right? They're descendants of Aaron, who was a Levite. So if we have Kohanim in the congregation and there are no Levites, what do we do with the second Aliyah? Do we go straight to the Yisrael? Do we call, let's say we have multiple Kohanim. Can we call one Kohen for the Kohen Aliyah and a different Kohen for the Levite Aliyah? No, we do not. And here's why. And Abaye said that we have a tradition that if there is no Levite in the synagogue, a priest reads in his place, indicating that maybe you can have a Kohen do the first Aliyah and a different Kohen do the second Aliyah. And the Gemara says, is that so? But didn't Rabbi Yochanan say one priest should not read after another priest, because people might mistakenly think that the second priest was called to read due to a flaw that was found in the status of the first priest, i.e. that he was found not to be a priest. There was something wrong with his lineage. There's doubt about that first priest, and we called up a second priest just to make sure that we had a priest read before the other Yisraels. And since lest people think that, the law is that if a Kohen comes up to read the Kohen Aliyah and there is no Levite in the shul, then the Kohen, that same Kohen, will also do the blessings over the second Aliyah, and that is the law. And one Levite should not read after another Levite. For the same reason, you can call a Levite first for the first Aliyah if there's no Kohen in the room, but then you wouldn't call a different Levite for the second Aliyah, the Levite Aliyah. Rather, you will go right to the Yisraels, right? But you would not call a Levite after a Levite, because people might mistakenly think that there is a flaw in both of them. If two Levites read one after the other, people might say that the second is not a Levite, but an Israelite. Or else that the first was not a Levite, and therefore a real Levite was called to read in his place. And the Gemara answers, when we said that when there is no Levite present, a priest reads in his place, we were speaking of the same priest who had already read from the Torah the first Aliyah. For in that case, there's no concern that people will think that a flaw had been found in his status. He just reads the first and second Aliyah. The Kohen reads the first and second Aliyah if there's no Levite present. The Gemara raises a question with regard to Rabbi Yochanan's statement. What is different that in the case where one Levite reads from the Torah after another Levite, Rabbi Yochanan says that there is a concern that people might mistakenly think that there is a flaw in both of them. It must be that he is concerned that people might say that one of them, either the first or the second, is certainly not a Levite. And if so, in the case where one priest reads from the Torah after another priest, he should also be concerned that people might say that one of them, either the first or the second, is certainly not a priest. Why then was Rabbi Yochanan concerned only about suspicions that might be raised about the first priest? And the Gemara answers, he speaks about a case where we have a presumption concerning the father of the second one that he is a priest. And the Gemara asks, if so, here too in the case of the Levites, let us say that we have a presumption concerning the father of the second one that he is a Levite. Rather, the concern here is that even if it is known that he is the son of a Levite, people might say that perhaps the father married a mamzeret, a daughter born from an incestuous or adulterous relationship, or he married a Gibeonite woman and thereby disqualified his children so that they are considered Israelites rather than Levites. If so, here too, in the case of the priests, there is concern that people might say that perhaps the priest's father married a divorced woman, or a yavama, right, a woman whose husband died and left a brother for her to marry in yibum. Perhaps the priest's father married a divorced woman or a yavama who underwent chalitza and thereby disqualified his children from the priesthood. Right, a priest can't marry a divorced woman or a yavama who did chalitza, and if he does, his children are not mamzers, but they are disqualified from the priesthood. Gemara answers, ultimately, is he a Levite? If the priest is disqualified from the priesthood owing to his blemished lineage, he has the status of an Israelite, not a Levite. Therefore, if he reads from the Torah after another priest, and it is known that his father is a priest, then it must be that he too is a qualified priest. And therefore, the only reason for concern is that people might say that there is a flaw in the status of the first priest. And with regard to the concern itself, the Gemara asks, and about whom is there a concern? Who might mistakenly think that the first priest's status is blemished? If you say, and I'm almost done, questions or comments, get them in. If you say that the concern is for those sitting in the synagogue until the end of the Torah reading, that is not a valid concern, as they see that he is counted as one of the 7 who must read from the Torah, and therefore he must certainly be a qualified priest. And rather, the concern is for those who leave before the conclusion of the reading and do not know that he was counted among the 7 readers. Again, it's because of these concerns and what the people might be thinking out in the congregation that they simply made the law. A priest reads first, then a Levite, then the Israels. If there's no Kohen, you can go right to an Israel or have a Levite do the first Aliyah and then go to the Yisrael Aliyahs. If there is a Kohen but no Levite present, the Kohen reads the Kohen Aliyah and the same Kohen reads the Levite Aliyah as well, and then we go to the Yisraels. And that's how we do it. Okay, so tomorrow, Monday, the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific, we'll pick it up with page 60. I'm going to do some questions right now, but I just want to mention we'll have class tomorrow, Monday, and then Tuesday, I have to go on another hiatus because of a surgery, right? So just like 3 weeks ago, I had an oral surgery on the right side of my mouth. Now I'm going back and they're going to do the left side of my mouth. And as I learned last time, there's no way I can teach that evening or for the next few days because I'll have, these swollen gums and a dressing over the stitches, etc. So I'm not going to be able to teach from Tuesday through Saturday, right? So after tomorrow's class on Monday, the next class will be next Sunday, a week from today. But we do have class tomorrow, and then I won't be able to teach during the week because of that surgery. Okay, let's go to questions or comments here on page 59. Bill, that's a lot of qualifications just to avoid saying that the statement about Rebbi is a bit of, as it were, pious hyperbole. I don't know. I don't know if it is hyperbole. Maybe they're just saying... I think it's almost like they're saying it's not hyperbole. He was just absolutely... You have to go back to Moses to find somebody who was as prominent in his generation. But to make their statement believable, they tested it, right, against all these other possibilities. And they stayed with it. That Rebbi was just absolutely head and shoulders above all the other sages of his generation. Bell, There are amazing handicrafts. I have a knitted shawl from Russia that has such fine yarn and also knitted so finely that a full-length shawl can pass through a wedding ring. Wow, a very old art. I am impressed. Wow. Joseph, are there any rabbinic dynasties of recent times that claim the lineage of teaching from a Rebbi and Rabbi Ami or Rabbi Ashi? I don't know if they go back to Rebbi or not. I don't know that. But there are definitely people in modern times who can trace their lineage way, way back. Like, way, way back. More than 1,000 years. And, well, as a Levite, I can trace my lineage 3,000 years, right, to Levi. I don't know, who else was in my direct line in terms of, great scholars or rabbis over the centuries, but I can trace back to Levi. And people who are Kohanim, they can trace their lineage back to Aaron, Moses' brother. Isn't that an amazing thing? That's what I've got for us today, and with God's help, we're together again tomorrow, Monday, at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a great night.